This morning, before you even fully woke up, you casually did something that no human being could have done for almost the first 290,000 years of our existence. You turned a faucet and perfectly clean water flowed straight from the wall. You squeezed engineered toothpaste onto a plastic toothbrush specifically designed to reach every corner of your mouth. You stood beneath a hot artificial shower for several minutes, washed yourself effortlessly, and chances are you still reached for a cup of coffee before feeling completely awake. Now imagine that every single one of those conveniences suddenly disappears. No running water, no pipes, no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no bathroom. Just you, the weather around you, and about 30 other people trying to survive under exactly the same conditions. That was everyday life for nearly all of human history. And the surprising part is that the way our ancestors stayed clean is probably nothing like what you're imagining. Let's break it down piece by piece, because every part of this story challenges something most people assume is true. At this very moment, your mouth is home to roughly 700 different species of bacteria. Brushing your teeth doesn't eliminate them. It simply keeps their populations under control. Ancient humans had none of the products we rely on today. No toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no dental floss. Yet when archaeologists examine prehistoric skulls, they repeatedly discover something unexpected. In many cases, those ancient teeth are actually in better condition than ours. Not every single time, not perfectly, but often enough that researchers knew there had to be an explanation. And it turns out the reason is surprisingly specific. A 2013 Nature genetics study examined bacteria preserved inside human teeth dating back as far as 7,500 years. The results showed that harmful bacteria in the human mouth increased dramatically after the agricultural revolution transformed the way people ate. Before farming became widespread, humans survived on an incredibly diverse diet. Roots, wild meat, berries, nuts, leaves, and countless seasonal foods gathered from nature. Their oral microbiome reflected that variety. Everything changed once grains became a regular part of the human diet. Large amounts of carbohydrates created the perfect environment for cavity-causing bacteria to thrive. Those microbes multiplied rapidly and gradually became far more dominant. Hunter-gatherers didn't have healthier teeth because they practiced better dental hygiene. They had healthier teeth because they ate differently. In many ways, the invention of bread also marked the beginning of widespread tooth decay. That doesn't mean our ancestors ignored their teeth. Archaeological evidence shows they cleaned them using small sticks with frayed ends that worked surprisingly well between the teeth. Researchers have uncovered these natural cleaning tools at ancient sites across Africa and the Middle East dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Many came from trees such as neem and miswak, whose fibers naturally contain antibacterial compounds. Modern scientific studies have shown that some of these sticks perform almost as effectively as an ordinary toothbrush. Our ancestors knew nothing about chemistry or microbiology. They simply noticed that certain branches left their mouths feeling cleaner than others, so they kept using what worked. The next part of the story is even more surprising, because when it comes to body odor, the biggest misconception is that sweat itself is responsible for the smell. Here's something that surprises almost everyone. Sweat itself doesn't actually smell. Fresh sweat is nearly odorless, made up mostly of water, minerals, and salt. The unpleasant odor appears only after bacteria living on your skin begin breaking down the compounds found in sweat. As they digest those substances, they release waste products that create what we recognize as body odor. The bacteria responsible for the strongest smells are concentrated mainly in your armpits and groin. They flourish in warm, enclosed environments where clothing traps heat and moisture. Our ancient ancestors lived under completely different conditions. They spent nearly all of their time outdoors. They traveled constantly in small groups instead of remaining in crowded settlements. Because of that lifestyle, the collection of bacteria covering their skin was very different from ours. Not necessarily healthier, simply different. Modern research on isolated communities that have never used soap or deodorant has revealed something fascinating. Their skin still supports bacterial species that have almost disappeared from modern populations. Some of those missing microbes actually performed valuable functions. They helped defend the skin against harmful pathogens. They contributed to maintaining a balanced skin pH. They even produced natural antimicrobial compounds that protected the body. Ancient people had no idea those microscopic organisms even existed. What they did understand was that certain plants seemed to help. Archaeological discoveries from numerous sites reveal that people regularly rubbed aromatic plants directly onto their skin. They used mint, lavender, juniper, sage. Their primary goal wasn't to smell better. They wanted to keep insects away. The pleasant scent was simply an added benefit. Instead of smelling like perfume, they smelled like the forests they lived in. In a world surrounded entirely by nature, that wasn't considered an unpleasant scent at all. But one of the most important hygiene habits of our ancestors is something almost nobody associates with cleanliness today. According to one well-known anthropologist, it may have contributed more to human survival than nearly anything else on this list. If you completely stopped washing your hair today, your scalp would likely become extremely oily for several weeks. That happens because your scalp has spent years adjusting to frequent shampooing that constantly strips away its natural oils. Ancient humans never entered that cycle. Their scalps naturally produced just enough oil for a life without shampoo. To care for their hair, they relied on combs instead. Archaeologists have uncovered bone and wooden combs dating back more than 10,000 years. But combing served a much bigger purpose than simply untangling hair. People carefully examined one another's hair for lice and parasites. They often spent hours doing this together. At first glance, that might sound insignificant. In reality, it was anything but. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for proposing the maximum number of stable social relationships humans can maintain, argued that physical grooming was humanity's original form of social bonding long before language became advanced enough to fill that role. Sitting close to another person while carefully searching through their hair is an incredibly intimate act. It requires trust, it demands patience, and it means allowing someone into your personal space. Ancient humans repeated this ritual every single day because strengthening social bonds was just as essential to survival as finding food or shelter. The next chapter completely overturns one of the most common myths about our ancestors, that they rarely bathed and were naturally filthy. One of the biggest misconceptions about ancient people is that they rarely bathed and spent their lives covered in dirt. That idea is almost entirely false. The confusion comes from mixing prehistoric hunter-gatherers with people who lived in medieval Europe. Those are two completely different periods with completely different lifestyles. Unlike medieval city dwellers, Hunter-gatherers depended on rivers, lakes, and streams for survival. Because they lived close to fresh water, bathing was simply part of everyday life. The Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies, still bathe regularly in rivers as a normal part of their daily routine. What they didn't have was soap. The earliest known evidence of manufactured soap comes from ancient Babylon around 2800 BC. Long before that invention, people relied on natural alternatives that were readily available around them. Sand acted as a gentle abrasive that helped scrub dirt from the skin. When mixed with water, wood ash created a mildly alkaline solution capable of breaking down oils and grease. Clay worked in a different way. It absorbed excess oil from the skin before being rinsed away with water. None of these methods matched the cleaning power of modern soap, but for people living in an entirely different bacterial environment, they were often more than enough. Their bodies had adapted to conditions that modern humans rarely experience. The final part of this story is probably the least comfortable to discuss, yet it explains why small hunter-gatherer groups avoided many of the devastating epidemics that later wiped out millions of people living in cities. Ancient humans dealt with waste much like every other animal on Earth. They simply went outside. But they also did something remarkably intelligent. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites shows that they consistently used designated toilet areas located well away from where they slept and prepared food. Researchers refer to these places as prehistoric latrine zones. Even Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives who lived alongside modern humans for thousands of years, appear to have followed the same practice. Evidence from archaeological sites in Spain and France points to this surprisingly organized behavior. Keeping waste separated from living spaces remains one of the most important public health practices ever developed. Most of history's catastrophic plagues weren't caused because people were naturally dirtier than we are today. They happened because growing cities forced thousands of people to live where clean water and human waste could no longer remain separated. Hunter-gatherers rarely faced that problem. By constantly moving in small groups, they naturally maintained a safe distance between their camps and their waste. They weren't healthier simply because they were smarter. Their lifestyle itself reduced the risk of widespread disease. What fascinates me most isn't that our ancestors managed to survive under those conditions. It's that they flourished, they built societies, they developed languages, they created art, they formed deep relationships, and they accomplished all of it without a single hygiene product manufactured in a factory. Chewing sticks, aromatic plants, social grooming, designated latrine areas, fresh river water. None of these were desperate survival tricks. They were practical solutions that worked for thousands of generations. Some of them continue to impress scientists even today. The antibacterial properties of the miswak stick, for example, are still being studied because they compare surprisingly well with certain modern dental products. Think back to everything you did this morning. The hot water flowing from your shower, the carefully engineered toothpaste, the perfectly shaped toothbrush, the artificial rain falling from your shower head. Every one of those everyday conveniences is the result of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and innovation. But it's easy to forget something important. For the overwhelming majority of human history, people solved the very same problems without factories, laboratories, or modern technology. They simply paid close attention to the world around them. They learned which branch cleaned their teeth most effectively. They discovered which plants kept insects away. They understood where it was safe to live. And just as importantly, they knew exactly where they should never build a camp. Our ancestors weren't dirty people living primitive lives. They were resourceful problem solvers using a completely different set of tools. And in some surprising ways, those natural solutions worked far better than we've ever given them credit for.